She bought the train car to rebuild her life. Rust, dust, and silence were her only companions. But beneath its floorboards slept a secret, a treasure the world had forgotten. What would you risk to find out if fixing broken things could also fix what's broken inside you? The auction lot smelled like rust and regret. Elena Marsh stood at the edge of the gravel yard, her hands shoved deep into the pockets of her work jacket, watching the auctioneer gesture toward a line of abandoned rail cars. Most were stripped for parts, gutted shells with missing wheels and broken windows. But at the far end of the lot, half hidden by tall grass and wild vines, sat something different. A 1,940 Pullman sleeper car, faded green paint, curved roof, windows clouded with decades of grime. It looked like it had been waiting. Elena's chest tightened. She had $3,200 left in her checking account. Everything else, the workshop, the tools, the house she'd shared with David, was gone. Sold, divided, taken. The divorce papers had been finalized 3 months ago. The eviction notice from her rented studio came 2 weeks later. She was 38 years old, and she was starting over with nothing but her hands and a dying dream. The auctioneer's voice crackled through a bullhorn. Next item. Lot 17, 1,947 Pullman sleeper car. As is. No title verification. Buyer responsible for removal. Starting bid, 3,000. Silence. Elena glanced around. A few contractors stood with clipboards, but none of them moved. An older man in coveralls shook his head and muttered something to his partner. The auctioneer sighed. Come on, folks. Solid bones on this one. Just needs some love. Elena raised her hand before she could talk herself out of it. 3,000. The auctioneer squinted at her. 3,200. And I'll close it now. Done. He brought the gavel down, sold to the lady in the back. An hour later, Elena stood in front of the train car with the deed in her hand and doubt crawling up her spine. Up close, it looked worse. The undercarriage was caked in rust. The windows were cracked or missing entirely. Vines had grown through gaps in the siding, wrapping around the frame like something trying to pull it back into the earth. But the structure was still there. The roof hadn't collapsed. The door, though warped, still hung on its hinges. She'd restored worse. At least, she used to. Elena climbed the metal steps carefully, testing each one. The door groaned as she pushed it open, and the smell hit her immediately: mildew, old wood, something faintly metallic. Inside, the narrow corridor was dim, lit only by shafts of dusty sunlight through the broken windows. The walls were paneled in dark wood, warped and stained but still intact. The floor was a mess of debris leaves, dirt, shards of glass. But beneath it all, she could see the bones of something beautiful. The berths were still there, folded against the walls. The brass fixtures tarnished but real. The ceiling panels, hand-carved with Art Deco flourishes. Someone had built this with care. Elena set her bag down and pulled out a rag. She started with the nearest window, wiping away layers of grime until a circle of clean glass appeared. Light poured through, illuminating the corridor in a soft golden glow. It was a small thing, but it was something. She worked for hours, sweeping debris into piles, prying open rusted latches, taking inventory of what could be saved. Her back ached. Her hands were filthy. But for the first time in months, she felt something other than numb. She felt useful. By the time the sun set, Elena had cleared enough space to unfold one of the berths. It was narrow, barely big enough to lie down, but it would do. She'd parked her car nearby, loaded with the few belongings she hadn't sold: a sleeping bag, a lantern, a duffel bag of clothes. She wasn't sure where she was going next, but tonight she'd sleep here. Elena spread the sleeping bag across the berth and sat down. her body heavy with exhaustion. The train car creaked around her, settling into the evening cool. Outside, crickets began their song. She lay back and closed her eyes. For the first time in months, she didn't feel like she was running. She felt like she was staying. It was past midnight when she heard it. A sound, faint but distinct. Clink, clink, clink. Elena's eyes opened. She lay still, listening. The noise came again, not from outside, but from beneath her, beneath the floorboards. Not the creak of old metal settling. Not the wind. Something deliberate, rhythmic, like something shifting or waiting. Elena sat up slowly, her pulse quickening. She pressed her ear against the floor. Clink, and then silence. Morning came cold and bright. Elena woke to the sound of birds and the distant rumble of a freight train passing somewhere beyond the rail yard. Her body ached from sleeping on the narrow berth, but she felt something she hadn't in months awake. She brewed coffee on a camp stove outside the train car, watching steam rise into the clear sky. The rail yard stretched around her, quiet except for the wind moving through tall grass. A few other derelict cars sat rusting in the distance, forgotten by everyone but time. But this one was hers. She climbed back inside with her tools and got to work. The first days were brutal. Elena stripped away layers of grime, sanded rust from metal fittings, pried loose rotted wood. Her hands blistered, her shoulders burned. But with every piece she removed, something beautiful emerged. Beneath decades of neglect, the train car had been built with care. The wall panels were solid mahogany, hand-fitted with precision joints. The brass window latches were engraved with delicate flourishes. Even the ceiling panels had been carved with subtle Art Deco patterns, waves and geometric lines that caught the light. Someone had loved this. Elena ran her fingers over the carvings, feeling the grooves worn smooth by time. Whoever built this hadn't just been doing a job. They'd been creating something meant to last. Near the rear of the car, she found a small brass plaque mounted beside the doorframe. She wiped away the tarnish with a rag, revealing engraved letters, crafted by H. Brennan, 1947. Elena stared at the name. H. Brennan. She pulled out her phone and searched. The results came slowly, but they came. Henry Brennan, master railcar craftsman, born 1910, worked for Pullman Standard in the 1942nd, known for his meticulous attention to detail and innovative designs. He'd built luxury sleeper cars for cross-country lines, cars that carried businessmen, honeymooners, soldiers coming home. But in 1952, he disappeared. No body, no explanation, just rumors. Some said he'd walked away from the industry after a dispute with management. Others whispered about debts, or a woman, or something darker. One obscure forum post mentioned a final masterpiece that Brennan had supposedly hidden before vanishing a train car no one ever found. Elena looked up from her phone, staring at the walls around her. Could this be it? That afternoon, a man appeared at the edge of the rail yard. He was older, maybe 70, wearing a faded railroad cap and a denim jacket. He watched Elena for a moment before calling out, "You're the one who bought the Pullman." Elena climbed down from the train car, wiping her hands on her jeans. "That's me." He walked closer, his eyes scanning the train car with something like recognition. "Hasn't moved in 40 years. Most folks figured it'd be scrapped by now. I'm restoring it." He nodded slowly. "You know whose work you're looking at?" Elena hesitated. "Henry Brennan?" The man's expression shifted surprise, maybe respect. Not many people remember that name anymore. "I'm learning." He was quiet for a moment, then said, "Brennan built 3 cars for the Continental Line back in '47. This was the last one." They called it the jewel of the fleet. He paused. But after he disappeared, people stopped talking about it. Bad luck, they said. Why? The man shrugged. Some stories stay buried for a reason. He tipped his hat and walked away, leaving Elena standing in the tall grass, her pulse quickening. She worked until the light faded, stripping more panels, replacing rusted bolts. But her mind kept circling back to the old man's words. Some stories stay buried for a reason. As evening settled, Elena knelt near the center of the train car, examining a section of warped flooring. The boards were loose, water damaged from years of rain seeping through cracks in the roof. She pried up one board, then another, and stopped. Beneath the original floorboards was a second layer. Elena frowned. She'd restored dozens of pieces of furniture, repaired old houses. Double-layer flooring wasn't unusual in itself, but this felt different. The second layer was cleaner, more deliberate. And there, faint but visible in the dim light, were pencil markings. She grabbed her flashlight and leaned closer. Lines, shapes, labels, a hand-drawn map. Elena's breath caught. The map showed the train car's interior layout berths, corridor, door placements, but in the rear corner, where the washroom should be, someone had drawn an X, and beside it, in small, careful script, "For those who see." Elena's hands trembled as she traced the markings. The washroom was still there. She'd cleaned it earlier that day, but the map suggested something else, something hidden. She stood slowly, her heart pounding, and walked to the rear of the train car. The washroom door hung crooked on its hinges. Inside, the small space was gutted, sink gone, mirror cracked, tiles missing. But the wall... Elena knocked on it. Hollow. She pressed her palm flat against the paneling, feeling for seams. Her fingers found a gap near the baseboard, almost invisible. And when she pressed, click, a section of the wall shifted. Just slightly. Just enough. Elena stepped back, staring. Someone had built a door, hidden in plain sight, and it had just unlocked. Elena stood frozen, staring at the wall panel that had just shifted beneath her hand. The click still echoed in her ears, soft, deliberate, mechanical. She waited, her breath shallow, listening for something else. But the train car was silent except for the wind outside and the distant hum of a freight line somewhere beyond the yard. Slowly, she pulled the panel toward her. It came away easily, revealing a narrow cavity behind the wall no more than 6 inches deep, running vertically from floor to ceiling. The space was clean, deliberately constructed, not structural, not accidental, a hiding place. Elena's pulse quickened. She reached for her flashlight and shone it into the gap. Inside, wrapped in oilcloth and tied with twine, was a bundle. She pulled it out carefully, her hands trembling. The cloth was brittle with age but intact. She untied the twine and unwrapped the layers. A leather-bound journal, thick, worn, the cover embossed with initials H.B. Elena sat down on the floor, cradling the journal in her lap. She opened it. The first page was dated the 3rd of April, 1947. Today I begin the last car. They don't know what I'm building. They think it's just another sleeper for the Continental Line. But this one is different. This one is mine. Elena turned the page. Sketches filled the margins, detailed drawings of joinery, panel construction, brass fittings. Notes in tight, careful handwriting described materials, measurements, techniques. But it was the tone that caught her, the reverence. A train car should be more than transport. It should be a refuge, a place where beauty meets function, where craftsmanship speaks louder than speed. Elena's throat tightened. She'd felt that way once, about furniture, about restoration, about the belief that making something beautiful mattered, even if no one else saw it. She kept reading. The entries spanned months. Brennan documented every step of the build, the selection of wood, the carving of panels, the installation of fixtures. But as the months passed, the tone shifted. The 18th of May, 1947. They want me to cut corners, use cheaper materials, faster methods. They don't understand. This isn't just a job. This is legacy. The 2nd of August, 1947. I've hidden something in the car. A gift for those who see beauty in broken things. Those who take the time to look. Elena's pulse quickened. She flipped forward. The 10th of November, 1947. The car is finished. But I won't let them take it. Not yet. There's one more thing to do. And then, near the end, an entry that made her hands go cold. The 14th of March, 1952. They're coming for me. I've refused their offer, and now they'll try to take what isn't theirs. If you're reading this, you've found the first door, but the real secret isn't in the walls. It's in the grain. Press where the wood remembers. The final page was a drawing. A detailed sketch of a wooden panel, ornate, hand-carved, with a specific pattern of grain and knots. Beneath it, an instruction. The headboard, Sleeper Berth 2. Press the second knot from the left. Elena stared at the drawing, her mind racing. The headboard. She knew exactly where it was. She stood quickly, the journal still in her hands, and moved to the second sleeper berth near the front of the train car. The berth was folded against the wall, its wooden headboard covered in decades of varnish and grime. But beneath the dirt, she could see the carving's intricate, geometric patterns that matched the sketch in the journal. Elena set the journal down and ran her fingers over the wood, feeling the grain, the knots, the subtle ridges. There, a knot. Smooth, worn, almost imperceptible. She pressed it. Nothing. She pressed harder and felt it give. A soft click, a shift in the wood. And then a section of the headboard slid inward, revealing a narrow compartment hidden behind the decorative panel. Elena's breath stopped. Inside, wrapped in cloth and carefully preserved, were objects. Small, deliberate, protected. She reached in slowly, her hands shaking, and pulled out the first bundle. Unwrapped it, and gasped. It was a miniature sculpture, no bigger than her palm. Carved from wood with breathtaking detail, a perfect replica of the Statue of Liberty. Every fold of the robe, every spike of the crown rendered with precision. Elena stared at it, her chest tight. This wasn't just craftsmanship. This was art. She reached into the compartment again. Another bundle, another sculpture. The Golden Gate Bridge, Mount Rushmore, the Capitol building. One by one, she pulled them out, laying them carefully on the floor. 47 in total. Each one a masterpiece. Elena sat back, her hands pressed to her mouth, tears blurring her vision. Henry Brennan hadn't just built a train car. He'd built a gallery, a hidden treasure, a legacy meant for someone who would see it. And she had found it. But as she stared at the sculptures, a new question formed. Why hide them? What had Brennan been running from? And what happened to him 2 days after he wrote that final entry? Elena picked up the journal again, flipping to the last page, and saw something she'd missed before. A sealed envelope, tucked into the back cover. Addressed simply, "To whoever finds this." Elena's fingers trembled as she traced the wood grain on the headboard. The second knot from the left, just as the journal had described. She pressed. Nothing. She pressed harder, feeling the wood give slightly beneath her palm. And then, click. A soft, mechanical sound. Old springs releasing. Wood shifting against wood. Elena stepped back as a section of the headboard slid inward, revealing a narrow compartment hidden behind the decorative panel. Her breath caught. The space was small, no more than a foot deep, but it had been carefully constructed. The interior was lined with thin metal, and along the top, she could see the remnants of a climate control mechanism. Copper tubing, small vents, a battery-powered motor that had long since died but had clearly once regulated temperature and humidity. Someone had gone to extraordinary lengths to preserve whatever was inside. Elena reached for her flashlight and shone it into the compartment. 3 objects lay wrapped in cloth. She pulled out the first bundle, her hands shaking. The fabric was old but intact fine linen, yellowed with age. She unwrapped it slowly and gasped. A wooden sculpture, no bigger than her palm, carved with breathtaking precision. The Statue of Liberty. Every fold of the robe, every spike of the crown. The torch held high, the tablet cradled in her arm. Even the faint texture of weathered copper had been rendered in wood. Elena stared at it, her chest tight. This wasn't just craftsmanship. This was art. She set it down carefully and reached for the second bundle. The Golden Gate Bridge. Cables, towers, roadway, every detail perfect. Then the third. Mount Rushmore. 4 presidents carved into a miniature mountain, each face distinct, expressive. Elena's hands moved faster now, pulling out bundle after bundle. The Capitol Building, the Grand Canyon, Niagara Falls, the Empire State Building. One by one, she unwrapped them, laying them carefully on the floor of the train car. 47 sculptures in total, each one a masterpiece. Elena sank to the floor, surrounded by tiny monuments to America, her vision blurring with tears. Henry Brennan hadn't just been a craftsman. He'd been an artist, a visionary. And he'd hidden his greatest work here, in a train car no one would ever think to look. She sat there for a long time, studying each piece. The level of detail was staggering. Every sculpture told a story not just of the landmark itself, but of the hands that had carved it. The patience, the love. Elena thought about her own work, the furniture she'd restored, the belief she'd once had that making things beautiful mattered, even when no one else cared. Brennan had felt the same way. She could see it in every curve, every line. Finally, she reached back into the compartment. 2 items remained. A photograph, faded, curled at the edges. It showed a young couple standing beside this train car when it had been new. The man was tall, dark-haired, holding a carving tool. The woman beside him was smiling, her hand resting on his arm. On the back, in faint pencil, Henry and Margaret, 1947. Elena turned the photo over, her throat tight. Brennan had built this for someone, for a life he'd imagined. And then everything had gone wrong. The final item was the sealed envelope she'd seen in the journal. Elena picked it up carefully. The paper was brittle, the red wax seal cracked but still intact. She slid her finger beneath it and unfolded the letter inside. The 16th of March, 1952. To whoever finds this, if you're reading these words, then you've done what I hoped someone would. You've looked past the rust and seen what was hidden. You've cared enough to search. These sculptures were commissioned in 1947 by a man named Victor Harland. He wanted a traveling exhibition to celebrate post-war America beauty, resilience, hope. He paid me well. But when the work was finished, he tried to take credit. Said I was merely a craftsman executing his vision. That the art was his. I refused, and he threatened to destroy me. I tried to fight him, hired a lawyer, spoke to the press. But Harland had money and influence. He buried my claims. made me look like a disgruntled employee seeking attention. So I hid the sculptures. Here, in the one place I knew would outlast both of us. Margaret begged me to let it go, to take what little money I had left and start over somewhere else. But I couldn't. These pieces represented everything I believed in. That craftsmanship matters. That beauty belongs to everyone, not just those who can afford to claim it. I planned to wait, to reveal the truth when the time was right. But Harlan's people are coming for me. I've received threats, warnings. I know I don't have much time. If you've found these, please don't let them disappear again. Don't let Harlan's lies stand. These sculptures belong to the people. They always have. Henry Brennan. Elena read the letter twice, her hands shaking. Then she looked at the sculptures spread across the floor. 47 pieces. Priceless. Beautiful. Lost for 70 years. And they were in her hands now. She thought about her bank account, the $300 she had left, the bills stacking up, the uncertainty of every tomorrow. One sculpture, just one, could change her life. But Brennan's words echoed in her mind. These belong to the people. Elena closed her eyes, pressing the letter against her chest. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the train car's windows. And somewhere in the distance, she heard the sound of tires on gravel. A car, coming closer. Elena's eyes snapped open. No one came to the rail yard at night. She stood quickly, moving to the window. Headlights swept across the abandoned tracks. A black sedan, pulling to a stop near her train car. A man stepped out. Suit, briefcase. He looked directly at the train car and smiled. Elena didn't move when the car door slammed. She stood frozen in the train car, staring through the window as the man in the suit walked toward her. His footsteps crunched on gravel, deliberate, unhurried. He stopped at the base of the train car steps. "Miss Marsh?" His voice was smooth, professional. "My name is Richard Caldwell. I represent the Harland Foundation." Elena's throat went dry. She stepped to the door but didn't open it. "How do you know my name?" Word travels in small communities, especially when someone buys a historic rail car. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "I'd like to discuss something with you. May I come in?" "I'm busy." "I'll be brief." His tone sharpened slightly. "We've been searching for this train car for a very long time, Miss Marsh. And we're prepared to make you a generous offer for anything you might have found inside." Elena's pulse hammered. "I don't know what you're talking about." Caldwell's expression didn't change. "Henry Brennan hid something that belongs to the Harland estate. If you found it, I suggest you let us handle it. Quietly. Before this becomes complicated." He handed her a business card through the cracked door. "Call me when you're ready to talk." Then he walked back to his car and drove away, leaving Elena standing alone in the dark. She didn't sleep that night. Elena sat on the floor of the train car, surrounded by the sculptures. Brennan's letter clutched in her hand. "They're watching," she thought. "They've always been watching." At dawn, she wrapped the sculptures carefully and hid them in the compartment again. Then she drove to the nearest library. She needed answers. Needed to know if what Brennan had written was true. The librarian helped her access archived newspapers, rail company records, legal documents. And Elena found it all. Articles from 1947 announcing the commission. Victor Harlan's name prominently featured. Henry Brennan mentioned once, briefly, as the craftsman. Then, in 1952, silence. No announcement of the exhibition, no mention of the sculptures, just a small article buried on page 8. Local craftsman missing after dispute. Henry Brennan, 42, has been reported missing following a legal dispute with art patron Victor Harland. Authorities are investigating. No follow-up, no resolution. Elena's hands shook as she read. Brennan had disappeared, and no one had cared enough to keep looking. That afternoon, Elena made 2 phone calls. The first was to an art historian at the State University. She described the sculptures carefully, without revealing where they were or how she'd found them. The historian's voice grew excited. If what you're describing is authentic, these would be extraordinary examples of mid-century American folk art. The level of detail you're mentioning, that's museum-quality work. What would they be worth? A pause. Collectively, 2 million. Maybe more. But Miss Marsh, if these are connected to Henry Brennan's lost exhibition, they're not just valuable, they're historically significant. They belong in a museum. Elena thanked her and hung up. $2 million. She stared at her phone, her chest tight. $2 million would change everything. A real workshop. Stability. A future. But Brennan's words echoed in her mind. These belong to the people. If you've been following her story this far, don't forget to like this video and subscribe, because what happens next will remind you that the hardest choices often reveal who we really are. The second call was to an appraiser. He came to the rail yard that evening, a quiet man in his 60s who handled the sculptures with reverence. "Where did you find these?" he asked, his voice hushed. "Does it matter?" He looked at her over his glasses. "It matters if you're planning to sell them. Provenance is everything." Elena said nothing. The appraiser examined each piece carefully, taking photographs, making notes. Finally, he set down his loupe and looked at her. "These are genuine. Mid-1940 seconds. The craftsmanship is extraordinary. If you're thinking about selling, I can connect you with private collectors who would pay top dollar. No questions asked. What if I wanted to donate them? To a museum?" His expression shifted. "That's noble. But be prepared for scrutiny. Museums will want documentation, proof of ownership. If there's any dispute over provenance, you could end up in litigation for years." Elena's stomach turned. "What kind of dispute? Heirs? Previous owners? Anyone with a claim?" He paused. "If these sculptures were commissioned and never delivered, someone might argue they still belong to the estate that paid for them. Even if they were stolen? Proving theft 70 years later?" He shook his head. "That's a legal nightmare." After he left, Elena sat in the train car, staring at the sculptures. She could sell one. Just one. Walk away with enough money to breathe again. But if she did, the rest would disappear, scattered into private collections, lost again. And Brennan's sacrifice would mean nothing. The knock came 3 days later. Elena had been working on the train car, trying to lose herself in the restoration, sanding, painting, anything to quiet her mind. She opened the door to find Richard Caldwell standing there again. This time, he wasn't alone. A woman stood beside him, older, expensively dressed, her expression cold. "Miss Marsh," Caldwell said. "This is Victoria Harland, Victor Harland's granddaughter." Elena's blood went cold. Victoria stepped forward. "I understand you found something that belongs to my family. I don't know what you're talking about." "Don't play games." Victoria's voice was sharp. "My grandfather commissioned those sculptures, paid for them. They belong to the Harland estate. Your grandfather tried to steal credit for them." "That's a lie." Victoria's eyes flashed. "Henry Brennan was a disgruntled employee who tried to extort my grandfather. He hid those sculptures out of spite." Elena felt rage rise in her chest. "That's not what happened." "Can you prove it?" Caldwell cut in smoothly. "Because we have contracts, documentation, a paper trail that shows the Harland estate paid for those sculptures. If you try to claim them, we'll sue. And we'll win. Elena's hands clenched. Brennan left a letter. A letter? Victoria laughed. From a man who disappeared 70 years ago? That won't hold up in court. Caldwell pulled an envelope from his briefcase. We're prepared to offer you $500,000. Cash. You walk away. We take the sculptures. No one needs to know they were ever found. Elena stared at the envelope. 500,000. It would solve everything, but it would also bury the truth. Henry Brennan couldn't win this fight, Victoria said quietly. What makes you think you can? Elena looked at her, then at Caldwell, then at the envelope in his hand. And she thought about Brennan, about Margaret, about a man who'd sacrificed everything to protect something he believed in. Get off my property. Victoria's expression hardened. You're making a mistake. Maybe, but it's mine to make. After they left, Elena sat on the train car steps, her hands shaking. She'd just turned down $500,000 and declared war on people who could destroy her. She pulled out her phone and dialed the one number she hadn't tried yet. The Smithsonian's American Folk Art Division. A woman answered. This is Dr. Sarah Okoye. How can I help you? Elena took a breath. My name is Elena Marsh, and I think I found something you've been looking for. Dr. Sarah Okoye arrived 3 days later. She was younger than Elena expected, mid-40s, with warm eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. She examined each sculpture carefully, photographing them from every angle, taking notes in a leather journal. These are extraordinary, she said finally. The level of detail, the historical significance. She looked at Elena. If we can authenticate the provenance, this could be one of the most important folk art discoveries in decades. Elena's chest tightened. What does that mean? Authentication? We'll need documentation. Letters, contracts, anything tying these sculptures to Henry Brennan and the original commission. And we'll need to build a case for why they should enter public trust rather than return to the Harland estate. Can we do that? Sarah's expression was honest. It won't be easy. The Harland Foundation has resources, lawyers, influence. She paused. But you have something they don't. You have the truth, and sometimes that's enough. The attorney came next. Pro bono, recommended by Sarah, a woman named Teresa Valdez who specialized in cultural heritage law. She sat in the train car, reviewing Brennan's letter, the photographs, the newspaper clippings Elena had gathered. Under the abandoned property doctrine, you have a legitimate claim to these sculptures, Teresa said. But the Harland Foundation will argue that the original commission contract gives them ownership. It'll come down to proving Brennan's intent that he hid the sculptures to protect them from theft, not to keep them for himself. How do we prove that? His letter helps. The fact that he never tried to sell them. And if we can find anyone who knew Brennan, who can testify to his character. Teresa looked at Elena. But you need to understand this will be public. The moment you donate these to the Smithsonian, the story goes viral. Your life changes. Are you ready for that? Elena thought about the train car, the restoration, the quiet mornings with coffee and the sound of wind through the rail yard. I don't know, she said honestly, but I know I can't keep them. That night, Elena's phone rang. David, her ex-husband. She almost didn't answer. I heard you bought a train car, he said without preamble. Elena, what are you doing? Starting over. In a rail yard? Alone? His voice softened. Come on, you're better than this. Elena closed her eyes. What do you want, David? I heard something else, that you found something valuable. Is that true? She didn't answer. Elena, if you've found something worth money, take it. Sell it. Get yourself out of this mess. You don't owe anyone anything. I owe myself something, she said quietly. I owe it to myself to do this right. And what does that get you? Satisfaction? Integrity? His laugh was bitter. You can't eat integrity, Elena. She hung up. The days that followed were the hardest. Elena worked on the train car from dawn until dark, sanding, painting, restoring, trying to lose herself in the rhythm of the work. But at night, alone, the weight of the decision pressed down on her. She could still call Caldwell, take the money, walk away. No one would know. No one would blame her. But every time she thought about it, she remembered Brennan's letter. These belonged to the people. And she thought about Margaret, about the photograph, about a woman who'd watched her husband sacrifice everything for something he believed in. Had it been worth it? Elena didn't know. But she knew that if she took the money, she'd spend the rest of her life wondering who she could have been. If you've been following her story this far, don't forget to like this video and subscribe, because what happens next will show you that sometimes the most valuable treasures aren't the ones we keep, but the ones we give away. 2 weeks later, Elena signed the donation agreement. The sculptures would go to the Smithsonian, displayed as the Brennan Collection, Art for the People. Full credit given to Henry Brennan, his story told alongside the art. Sarah hugged her. You're doing the right thing. Elena nodded, her throat tight. But she didn't feel victorious. She felt exhausted, terrified, uncertain. The press release went out the next day, and the world descended. News vans, journalists, cameras everywhere. Miss Marsh, how did you find the sculptures? What made you decide to donate them instead of selling? Do you have any comment on the Harland Foundation's statement? Elena stood in front of the train car, blinking in the camera lights, trying to answer questions she didn't have words for. The coverage was relentless. Articles, interviews, social media exploding with debates about ownership, legacy, the ethics of art. Some people called her a hero. Others called her a fool. The Harland Foundation issued a statement claiming the sculptures were still legally theirs and threatening litigation. But Elena had expected that. What she hadn't expected was the letter. It arrived 3 days after the news broke. Handwritten, postmarked from Vermont. Dear Miss Marsh, my name is Margaret Brennan Holloway. I'm Henry Brennan's granddaughter. I saw the news about the sculptures, about what you're doing, and I wanted to thank you. My grandfather disappeared when my mother was just a child. She grew up believing he'd abandoned us, that he'd cared more about his work than his family. But now I know the truth. He didn't abandon us. He was protecting something he believed in. I have something that belongs to you, something my grandfather left behind. If you're willing, I'd like to meet. Elena's hands shook as she read the letter. Margaret Brennan, Henry's family, still alive, still looking for answers. Elena picked up her phone and dialed the number at the bottom of the page. A woman answered. Her voice was soft, careful. Miss Holloway? Elena said. This is Elena Marsh. There was a pause. Then, quietly. Thank you for calling, and thank you for what you're doing. My grandfather would have been proud. Elena's throat tightened. Can we meet? Yes. I think it's time you knew the rest of the story. Margaret Brennan Holloway arrived on a quiet morning, driving a faded blue sedan. She was 73, with silver hair pulled back in a simple bun and hands marked by years of work. When Elena opened the train car door, Margaret looked up at the old Pullman with tears in her eyes. I never thought I'd see it again, she whispered. Elena helped her up the steps. You've been here before? Once, when I was 4. Margaret touched the wall gently. My grandfather brought me. Let me run through the corridors while he worked. I thought it was magic, a train car that never moved but felt like it was always going somewhere. They sat in the sleeper berth, side by side. Margaret pulled an envelope from her bag. Yellowed, sealed with wax. My grandfather left this with my mother before he disappeared. He made her promise if anyone ever found the sculptures, we had to give them this. Elena took the envelope carefully. What happened to him? Margaret's expression was soft, sad. He didn't die in 1952. He fled, changed his name, lived in a small town in Vermont for 30 more years, working as a carpenter. She paused. He never spoke publicly about the sculptures, never tried to reclaim them. He was too afraid of what Harlan's people might do. But he told you? On his deathbed, 1982, he made me promise to watch for the train car, to watch for someone who might care enough to look. Margaret smiled through tears. And here you are. Elena opened the envelope. The letter inside was in Brennan's handwriting. Steady, kind. To whoever finds this, if you're reading these words, then you've done what I hoped someone would. You've looked past the rust and seen the beauty beneath. You've cared enough to search, to restore, to understand. I hid those sculptures to protect them. But I also hid them because I believed that one day someone like you would find them. Someone who knows what it means to fix broken things. Who understands that restoration isn't just about objects, it's about belief, about hope. I bought this train car in 1950, paid for it outright, never sold it. I wanted it to outlast me, to wait for the right person. The deed is yours now, legally, fully. This train belongs to you, not because you found treasure inside it, but because you saw what it could be. The train was always meant to carry dreams forward. Now it's your turn. Thank you for restoring what I couldn't. And thank you for restoring me. Henry Brennan. Elena's hands shook. He bought the train car? Margaret nodded. The deed's in there. Notarized. Legal. It's been held in trust all these years, waiting for someone to claim it through purchase at auction. She smiled. You didn't just buy a wreck, Elena. You bought a legacy. Elena stared at the deed, at the signature, at the proof that everything she'd done had been meant to happen. I don't understand, she whispered. Why me? Because you're like him, Margaret said simply. You see broken things and believe they can be beautiful again. 2 months later, the Smithsonian opened the Brennan collection. The sculptures were displayed in a gallery built to look like a train car, wood paneling, brass fixtures, the feeling of movement even while standing still. Elena stood in the crowd, watching people move through the space. Children, families, artists, all of them marveling at the tiny monuments to America, carved by hands that had refused to let beauty be stolen. Dr. Sarah Okoye found her. The response has been overwhelming. We've had over 10,000 visitors in the first week. Elena nodded, her throat tight. And the Harlan Foundation? Sarah's smile was grim. They dropped the lawsuit. Public opinion turned against them. Turns out people don't like wealthy families trying to silence artists. She paused. You did it, Elena. You won. But Elena didn't feel like she'd won anything. She felt like she'd finally let go. The Smithsonian's offer came a week later. They wanted to fund the full restoration of the train car, turn it into a mobile exhibition space. The Brennan collection would travel the country, stopping in small towns and cities, allowing people who would never visit Washington to see Henry's work. And they wanted Elena to oversee it, to restore the train car, to travel with it, to tell the story. You'd be paid, Sarah explained. Salary, travel expenses, everything covered. And the train would be yours legally, permanently. A gift from the museum to honor what you've done. Elena stood in the train car, running her hand along the paneling she'd sanded, the windows she'd replaced, the floors she'd restored board by board. "I don't know if I can," she said quietly. "Why not?" "Because I'm not special. I'm just someone who needed a place to start over." Sarah smiled. "That's exactly why you should do it. Because you understand what it means to be broken, and you know how to fix things." That night, Elena worked late, finishing the last details of the restoration. She was installing the final piece, a polished brass plaque to replace the old builder's plaque, when she noticed something. Beneath where the old plaque had been, carved into the wood, was a message. Faint, almost invisible, but there. "For those who restore broken things, thank you for restoring me." Elena sat down hard, tears streaming down her face. Henry Brennan had left this 70 years ago. For her, for whoever found it. A thank you across time. She pressed her palm against the words, feeling the grain of the wood, the love carved into every surface. And she understood. This wasn't just about sculptures, or legacy, or doing what was right. It was about belief. The belief that broken things could be beautiful again. That someone, somewhere, would care enough to look. Elena stood, wiping her eyes. She had a train to restore, and a country to show that sometimes the most valuable things aren't what we keep, but what we choose to share. 1 year later, the train car rolled into a small town in Montana. Elena stood on the platform as families gathered. Children pressed their faces against the windows, and the afternoon sun painted everything gold. The Pullman sleeper car gleamed, polished wood, brass fittings catching light. Every panel restored, every detail honored. Inside, the Brennan collection waited 47 tiny monuments to America, each one a testament to hands that had refused to let beauty be stolen. Elena climbed down and opened the doors. "Welcome," she said to the first family, a mother and daughter holding hands. The girl's eyes went wide. "Is this really a train?" "It is, and it's traveled a long way to meet you." The tour had been going for 6 months now. Small towns, rural communities, places where people didn't have museums or galleries, places like the one Elena had come from. Everywhere they stopped, people came, touched the wood, studied the sculptures, asked questions, and Elena told them the story about Henry Brennan, about integrity, about the belief that beauty belonged to everyone. She taught workshops in the train car, basic woodworking, restoration techniques, the patience required to bring broken things back to life. And she watched people's faces change, watched them realize that they, too, could create, could restore, could believe in something worth protecting. Margaret traveled with her sometimes. The older woman would sit in the sleeper berth, telling stories about her grandfather, his laugh, his stubbornness, the way he'd hum while he worked. "He would have loved this," Margaret said one evening, watching Elena sand a section of paneling that had warped during travel. Seeing his work shared like this. Elena paused, running her hand over the wood. "I think he knew. I think he always believed someone would." Margaret smiled. And he was right. They sat in comfortable silence, listening to the wind outside. 2 women, 2 generations, connected by a man who died before either of them had truly known him. But they knew him now. Through the work, through the legacy, through the train car that refused to stay still. That autumn, Elena stood on the observation platform as the train rolled through the countryside. The restoration was complete, every surface polished, every mechanism restored. The train car that had been left to rust for 40 years now carried dreams across America, just like Henry had wanted. Elena thought about the woman she'd been a year ago, broke, divorced, living out of her car. She'd bought this train car with her last $3,000, hoping it would give her a place to start over. And it had. But not in the way she'd imagined. She hadn't needed a home. She'd needed a purpose. And Henry Brennan, across 70 years, through rust and silence, had given her one. The train's whistle sounded. Long, mournful, beautiful. Elena smiled. She thought about all the broken things she'd restored. The furniture, the train car, the sculptures. And she realized they'd all been restoring her, piece by piece, panel by panel, until she was whole again. The landscape blurred past fields turning gold, mountains rising in the distance, small towns with lights just beginning to flicker on. And Elena understood something Henry Brennan had known all along. Some journeys never truly end. They just find new tracks to follow. The sculptures were worth millions. But what Elena found in that train car wasn't wealth, it was purpose. She learned that true value isn't measured in dollars, but in the meaning we create and the legacies we honor. Some treasures are meant to be kept, others are meant to be shared. The difference between the two defines not what we have, but who we become.